All right, in this session, we're going to cover continuous export from application insights and log analytics. So we'll start with typical export scenarios, why we'd want to do this, look at how to do this natively through the Azure Portal, building queries and exporting to CSV, or being able to build queries and push those to Power BI using the Power Query M language. We'll look at how to set up continuous export within appinsights and data export within log analytics. Look at what the data looks like within our blob storage we're going to set up. Talk about why we'd want to use blob storage versus Event Hub. And then finally, we'll do a demo of a C# application that will ingest the blobs, transform them, and ready them for use with other third-party systems. Okay, for this session, we're quickly going to cover objectives and introduction, look at how we can export from the Azure Portal natively, exporting using the RESTful API, what is continuous export or data export, and how that would look with Azure Storage. And we'll look at the data export model, and finally wrap with a demo for Power BI visualization, setting up data export, reviewing the storage within data export, and then some options to ingest it with C#. Our objectives include understanding how to export query results with CSV, understanding how to export query results with Power Query M for Power BI, and then how to export with continuous export or data export. My name is Ali Yousefi. I am a senior customer engineer with Microsoft. My certifications include Azure Solution Architect, Dynamics 365 Power Platform, as well as Azure DevOps Engineer Experts. I'm also a Microsoft Certified Trainer. Microsoft Services offers a monitoring workshop that will allow you to work with Microsoft engineers to help implement a monitoring strategy for Power Platform and Microsoft Dataverse. Note, this title may change in the future, but please contact your Microsoft representative for any additional information if you're interested in pursuing this workshop. Let's take a look at some typical export scenarios. So for one of the first export scenarios we're going to run into is how to help reduce cost, right? So part of exporting data, one of the benefits of that is to reduce costs while we still are able to retain the data. So what benefits we get from that are reducing any issues where we might run into something getting purged within our log analytics. So we're going to have everything stored within log analytics, but if we ever need to sort of replicate that out, that'll help us in case there's any issues with purging. It'll also help us with retaining data for any audit or security purposes. So another thing would be rich visualizations to help us diagnose and troubleshoot. So being able to take the data, look at it in Power BI as we talked earlier, being able to put it into workbooks, dashboards, or even other visualizations you might have. For this piece here, we'd look at something like machine learning. So we can take this data, put it into data sets such as Azure Data Lake Storage, so that we can run machine learning or any sort of additional analytical services on top of that data. Finally, exporting into third-party services, right? So we might want to integrate this data into other clouds, into our on-premise data centers. So having the ability to set up an export into our third-party using storage accounts or event hubs, for instance. Let's take a look at how we can export with the Azure Portal. So exporting with the Azure Portal, we have a few options here, mainly around Excel or CSV files, as well as doing something sort of like direct query within Power BI. So we have export to CSV, as you can see in this image below. Actually, let's step back. So this image here is pulled from the log designer within Application Insights or Log Analytics. In the toolbar above the query designer, you'll see a few commands, one of them being export as shown in this image. When you click on this, so flyout will show you these options shown in this slide, which is export to CSV displayed column, so only the columns that you have within your actual Kusto query. export to Power BI, which will take your query that you've written and export that and allow you to work with it within Power BI, and then finally open in Excel, which will take the result sets and have that in Excel as well. So let's talk quickly about CSV files here. So exporting a CSV or Excel from the Azure Portal, the Excel option gives you the XLSX version of it. The CSV is the one that's been around much longer. The Excel is a relatively newer feature. The CSV is useful because it allows you to download the file. You can store that within blob storage, for instance, so you can retain that. And you can easily pass that along to support. So if you needed to maybe offer up some of these data points from appinsights, but you didn't want to actually give, say, reader access to the resource itself within Azure, you can use CSV as an alternative. As you can see in this image below, you'll get, the first row will be the columns that you've called out. The column names can be defined within your Custo query using the project keyword. So in this one here, we can see the timestamps. We have the IDs, the source, as well as what the item type. So column J item type would be the table that's coming from. In this case, this is a request. So what we're looking at here is web API request to a Dataverse endpoint. So we can see that it's hitting what URL it is, if it's successful or not, what was the duration in terms of milliseconds, and on column I is a performance bucket. So this will be retained, or can be retained and reviewed with support. So for displaying data in Power BI, a couple of options we have. We have the CSV file that can be downloaded and then referenced in Power BI. You'll use the file.content method. You can see here in this image. And then you can have a CSV.document here. If you want to work with mQuery directly, you can also export that as well. You'll get a text file to give you instructions 1, 2, 3. You'll want to go to get data, blank query, advanced query editor. You'll see it uses web.contents versus file.contents. It's hitting a application insights endpoint, and it's using this JSON.document to help parse it here. You'll see the query within, and you'll see it'll have the appinsights API key sort of available to you at the end of this endpoint. So be mindful of the permissions you need to be able to hit this endpoint. So if you share, for instance, this Power BI report with a user, they would have to have access to get the data from from application insights. So let's take a look at the REST API, which can help us provide access to the data for our end users or support teams. So the Application Insights REST API gives us the ability to provide temporary or long-term access to Application Insights data. You can provide a name for the API key and choose what rights it has, including read, telemetry, write, annotation, and authenticate using the SDK control channel. When you are working with it, you'll notice that you'll have a certain amount of keys that you can work with. I believe it may be up to 8 or 10 at this point. You can work with the CLI, the PowerShell commandlets as well to interact with these, including modifying them and reading the keys and updating those and removing and so forth here. Once you get it, you can actually use it with the API Explorer. So this link here, this dev.applicationinsights.io API Explorer query schema, can provide you the query schema and give you a Explorer to sort of understand how you can submit your queries either with GET or POST messages. You can add queries within the body, or you can add it within the query string itself. So that might help you when you're working with Power BI, for instance, and you want to be able to provide access to data, but not necessarily give someone access to the App Insights resource directly within Azure. So in this section, we'll cover continuous export. Okay, before we move on, I want to quickly cover some of the terminology we'll be using going forward. With App Insights and Loganalytics, both have similar sort of export type functionality. For App Insights, it's going to be called continuous export. For Loganalytics, you'll typically see data export. For this section, I'll probably use them interchangeably. We'll be focusing more on the log analytics side of it, but I may use continuous export just from legacy discussions. But just be mindful that these essentially are the same idea, where we're taking data within one of these stores and then funneling it out. So that said, let's talk a little bit about some of the basics of what we have with retention and export. So the standard retention period for application insights is 90 days. That can be adjusted with a slider within the portal or PowerShell, which I'll show you on the demo. And that's useful for, if you want to retain the data within App Insights. So if you're using the REST API, so like you're hitting that Power Query M language with Power BI, or you want to be able to run the queries within workbooks. So for instance, I'm building workbooks on user retention. Well, I probably want to see something longer than 90 days, so you could stretch that out up to 2 years. So there's that piece of it. When you do set up this export as well to say, well, okay, maybe I want to stay even longer than the 2 years, or we talked about the first item, which was reducing the cost. Pushing that over to blob storage or Event Hub are the two kind of main areas, and we'll talk here in the next slide about why to choose one or the other. For the most part, we'll be pushing out to Azure Storage so that we can be able to churn that data. It allows you to consume the data how you want, and then be able to fashion it in any way. So if you want to use data factories, for instance, to help extract, transform, and load data, if you want to use any sort of data bricks to help sort of model the data and make it a little bit more consumable, you can do that as well using the data export or continuous export feature, which will allow you to get that into Data Lake. All right, continuous export small and big data sets. So making a decision between small and big, and that's can be considered relative, I suppose. For smaller data sets, I typically go with sort of custom logic to parse the blobs that are being sent to, say, the data lake, right? So for smaller sets, I like pushing this to data lake using Azure functions, logic apps flows. Like these have native triggers for when files are added to a blob storage, for instance, in this case. So we can be triggered off that and go, or we can pull the data lake for files and be able to parse that and do what we want. So for instance, I may want to take the data that say it's been retained outside of my normal usage, but I want to set up an App Insights and then pump data within the App Insights or Log Analytics. I can actually spin up one and then ingest data into App Insights. Obviously being mindful of some of the stipulations we have with the timestamps. One of the things I do for some of my workshops I lead is that I take some data sets that include some of these scenarios that I want to work through with my attendees, and I'll load those up and we'll walk through those. And we'll focus more on the content itself and not the timestamp, but that's something you can do. For instance, that's a use case we have. For bigger data sets, I'd go with streaming it to an Event Hub or using like the Stream Analytics piece. You'll find online step-by-step instructions on how to set up Stream Analytics to SQL on-prem or Azure, as well as step-by-step for Event Hubbing out to things like Kafka, for instance, or other systems you may need. You just have to decide where do you want your data to go for further processing, and then be able to understand the model, which is what we'll cover next. So here's a look at the 4 tables that are typically being delivered from Dataverse into Application Insights. So we have the page view, we have request, we have dependency, and we have exceptions. So for page view here, we show the count of the page view, the metric, the name, the URL, so forth. So this is the model. So when you have your data delivered to your data lake, it'll be serialized into something like this, and then you can deserialize into what you want. For request as well, same idea. This will all be serialized into request files that'll be broken down into, I believe it's still hourly containers within your storage. We'll take a look at that here in a minute. And here's dependencies. So you have your dependency with the success codes and IDs and how they would link back to the request. And then finally your exceptions, which are your full stack, your stack trace, for instance, your outer and inner exceptions, and then where was it failing at, and the exception type and any codes you might have. All right, so let's talk specifically about the loganalytics workspace data export feature, right? So it allows us to continuously export data just like appinsights to an Azure storage account or Event Hub. I believe that the appinsights was just standard for the storage account. As we're moving away from the classic appinsights to the workspace-based appinsights, this will open us up to not only the storage account but the Event Hub as well option. Once we've configured it, the data will be sent to the selected tables that we showed earlier. That you'll see a little bit of a different name. So, for instance, instead of request, it might be called app request, or app dependencies, app page views, app exception, something like that. But it'll be exported into hourly append blobs, or if you need near real time, go with Event Hub, right? So this one is for something that if you just wanted to retain it to data lake. So think about how Dataverse, and when you set up the data export and how it's exported out, you can set up how you can do the append, for instance, option. Same kind of thing will happen here within loganalytics. And actually you can have those point to the same data lake if you wanted to have say your data within the same area as your logs. I would probably suggest not doing that, just for the sense of keeping data in this separate, because we want to keep, we start thinking about governance and security, keeping data away from telemetry and not intermingling those, because there definitely could be conflicts with PII or any security sort of or confidential type information there. So I'd probably keep those separate. That's your choice there. And Event Hub will allow you to take this and push it again to other things, right? You can have listeners that can listen to the Event Hub and they can pick that up and do with it what you wish. All right, and here is the data export model for loganalytics. See the incoming data, right? So if I were, for instance, sending a request data point to loganalytics, it's going to go within my Azure Monitor block we have here. It'll get pushed into the ingestion pipeline. The ingestion pipeline will actually do a couple of things. Because we're having the near real-time feature of it, it'll not only push to our loganalytics workspace that allows us to do the visualizations, the workbooks, that kind of thing, but it'll also push out to Event Hub and for the storage account. So you can see this actually, it's not going through Workspace and then going through Event Hub. It's actually, sort of twofold here, and then as well as going to Event Hub and storage account. So if there was any issue with this, hopefully that would be negated and we could be bypassed by simply going this route here. So this is where we get that near real time, is by avoiding necessarily going to Workspace. But I mean, when we do it from our perspective, we don't really see any difference. This is just the sort of the internal mechanisms of how this works here. Okay, let's talk data export automation, right? So we get into a spot where we may want to help automate this if we're, I don't know, we're doing DevOps, or we just we want to be able to sort of monitor this stuff and take action with an automated fashion. So a couple of options we have here within the az.operationalinsights module. We'll have a couple of commandlets here, and the new AZ operational insights data export to create one, remove, obviously to remove it, and then finally the update that we have here. So the update, here's the syntax for it. We obviously have the requirements such as resource group name, workspace name, data export name, and then our table name, right? So table name is important. You can choose what tables you want to export. So maybe you just are interested in page views for user activity. Maybe you're interested in just exceptions, maybe a mixture of the both. So this is where you can set that up, and you can see this is an array here, so you can choose multiple tables. I would recommend being mindful of exporting tracing. I think by default still appinsights turns that off just because that could be very, very chatty. So you could just incur a lot of ingress from that, and your costs could possibly go up as well. But yeah, keep that one in mind, how you would do that. Finally, for updating, if you ever wanted to say turn it off or on, there's a enable flag, and you just pass in the true or false, and you'll be able to either turn it off or on how you want. And again, here's your destination resource ID. So for the resource ID would be, think of the Azure resource. So kind of like the arm where it shows the resource group, the ID, what type it is, and finally the identifier for the particular resource. All right, so let's look at a demo for exporting to Power BI, building a quick visualization there, and then configuring the data export feature with loganalytics, and we'll take a look at some of the blobs from the export itself, talk through some of that, and then finally maybe even look at how to work with it via some C# code. Okay, what we've started with here is the application insights within Azure. This is configured to have the Dataverse data points delivered to it from one of my environments, and you'll see here if I run, for instance, exceptions, you'll see the CRM security exceptions and so forth here. In our case, we're going to look at page views, which let's do for 7 days. We have that. See, there's a bit of data here. Entity list load for views, and there might be, there was pages and entity form and that kind of thing. Request into the Dataverse API. And the URL that was hit and how long it took them to finally get into these here. So you can see these are definitely not optimized. So we're going to actually just show that there's data in here, then we'll export that out. So in our case here, we're going to hit new. You can hit this tab. You can choose queries that you might have. We'll go to the community Git repo. And go to Dataverse. And let's go get other errors and failures. Maybe we can do, let's do this service bus exceptions here. So this looks at exceptions, but in the last 30 days that have this source from webhook plugin. Let's see if there's anything in here. It looks like we have some data points here. Looks like on 12, 15, 47, and 111, we had 31. So in our case, since we're going to work with it in Power BI, we don't necessarily need to render. And I'm actually going to not summarize. So we'll hit run, see our different data points. I'm going to hit export. And the CSV, just click those and you'll have the CSVs. For this one, we're not going to cover that. We're going to just do the Power BI. Open up the text file, follow the directions, right? Have Power BI desktop opened, get data, blank query, advanced query editor, and then copy what you see here. So we'll copy this. We'll open it up. So we have this piece here, and we can go now get data and choose how we want to do it. In our case here, we have blank query, whatever we want. See these options. Oh. All right, so that opened up finally. So we have advanced editor. We'll click on that and we'll paste over what we have and hit done. Real quick on this one, look at, let's see, this one's good. It has the duration here. Sometimes if you don't have a query here, something like timestamp, it'll add the last like 24 hours in this, so you'll want to remove that. If you're not familiar with any of this, look at some of the information on the docs site for Power BI, including how to get table from records, joins, and from rows and transforming. For that, it's kind of done it for us, so we'll just hit done. And we'll have to tell it how to connect, so let me enter some credentials here. So in my case, I'm using this organization account feature here to sign in. So all right, so now we've got the data within Power BI. We can play with it a little bit if we want. We can work with timestamp and look at that. You can transform. If you want to work with the view, you can do some column quality aspects here. See, this one's 61% are empty and this kind of thing here. So here's what we have if you want to play around with it. So that's there. You can build off this and so forth. In our case, we're going to click on close and apply. And this will render. All right, we're loading our data. Let's see what we have. Okay, did a bit of resizing to fit everything in here. We can see our query with our different columns will show up. Timestamp, outer message, organization, entity name, and so forth here. So I'll just click a table. Can drag this out a bit. And we'll add in some more bar information here. Our timestamp. And you can work with the timestamp here to combine it into a single sort of date right here, right? So just quickly building something. If you want to do slicers, that'll help you look at maybe a particular area. For instance, if you want to do a slider here, you can do time, like time and so on. So if you want to really break it down in a particular area, and it'll help filter it down. Clicking into it, you can have all that and build visualizations. This is a quick way of doing it. You can hit save this, and then eventually publish it out. So this is how you can get started getting that within Power BI. For more information on Power BI, including like modeling, building relationships, and more of the viewing, like DAC expressions and so forth, just follow along with the Power BI documentation. Finally, once you're done, you can export it out. Here's an example of looking at custom events and requests and so forth. So this is on the Power BI service here. Different information that's here, right? So even these visualizations you can have set up. Okay, so let's go to appinsights and configured continuous export here. Let me do some resizing. All right, that looks better. So appinsights. We can scroll down on the left and we can see continuous export. Yep, we're good there. So we've already got one set up. So if I want to look at one that's already been set up, classic appinsights has been deprecated. It's letting you know that this one's been disabled, but you can enable it here. So that's, you can look at the existing ones, but let's create a new one. So we can add. So it looks like we've already gone through this deprecation piece here. So it wants us to use the Workspace based appinsights link. So if we want to, we can upgrade our appinsights using this link. So let's take a look at it. Migrate to migration process. This should be migrating here. So properties, migrate to Workspace base. So let's go ahead and do that. Properties, and we can Workspace. So once you click on this, you can set up your loganalytics workspace and hit apply here, and it'll validate and then let you know when it's ready to do it. And we'll get our little notification here. So what that means is now we have this default workspace back on our overview. So if we click on that, we'll go there. And we are now in loganalytics workspace. So to set that up, we can go here to the diagnostic settings. and configure this piece here. So let us choose how we want to do it, right? So do we want to send to a partner solution, stream to Event Hub, archive to storage account, send to another workspace? You can choose which ones you want here. For the data export piece, which is what we're going to do here, this is the one we talked about earlier. Here's how we do that. So you'll set up a role name. In our case, we'll say Dataverse data export. And here's different sources. So app dependencies, app exceptions, app page views, app requests. These are the ones that we already have from appinsights. So we'll be hitting next there and choosing our destination. We have storage account, we have Event Hub. So if we choose Event Hub, again, it'll let us choose our namespace and then our name. Remember, this can be good for high ingress, for instance, or the real-time processing. And once we're done, we hit review and create, and we'll have some data to go review. So let's go take a look at it. Okay, so what you see here is a storage container here within, this is Azure Storage Explorer, so we see our storage account, see the blob container. This is the one we configured, D365 telemetry export. Here's our D365 telemetry insights. It puts the instrumentation key on the end of it there, so I can see what I have there. Here's my different folders it created. So exceptions, page views, RDD is dependencies, and requests. So if we want to go look at page views, for instance, I can see this is one I've configured in the past actually, but you can see here's my different page views I've had for instance 2021, 2020, and so forth there. So this is how this is configured. We can deep dive into a specific folder, for instance. So these are by the hours, and here's the blob. So let's go look. So here, real quick before we do that, so this is this will give us the timestamp. So 2021 0717 timestamp 051056 05756 58. So I could choose one of these. Let's choose the bigger one here, and it'll start downloading. You'll see it down here in the activities. All right, so here's the blob file. You can see it's pretty good. I'm going to take this and put it into Visual Studio Code. All right, we are in code, and I went ahead and formatted it to take a look at it. So let's see what we have here. So we see we have this object in a view, multiple views here, internal, context. So this is an entire record. Let's collapse this a little better here. Oops. Context. So here's our objects we have. So let's start here. We have a view. We have a view for expired process with our duration metrics. So here's the value we had. So how long did this take to run there? Here's our ID, what we had, and the context, which is important for us, and knowing what version of Dataverse we were hitting, what was the event, where did this come from, what was the device. In this case, this is the data export. So if you're running Dataverse, you should see something like CDS data export, who the user was, were they authenticated. Here's your operation ID, which can be used if you have exceptions to correlate it down and so forth, and then custom dimensions, right? So view, load type, what kind of type did I have, what was my UCI app or model driven app, cold latency, warm latency, throughputs, what was it a cold or warm load or not. Here's a different one showing a dashboard load, how long that took, as well as the internals and the context here. So you can see how it sort of serializes this down into different JSON objects. Let's take a look at the exceptions. All right, so we're in the exceptions. We're going to choose one from recently here, so 1/30/21. All right, so we formatted it. Let's take a look here. So we have basic exception. Let's close these up, expand it out. All right, so basic exception will show us security exception. You know, what was the outer exception? In this case, this user was missing the privilege for read async operation. Principal user right there, internals, within our context, CDS data export from the server, so not from the user, from their workstation, but from the application itself, from Dataverse, as well as where this is running from, so forth, like what data center our organization is hosted on, for instance. And here's the exception source, a client error, in the web, right? Correlating ID. So we'll cover that in another session about what these actually mean and how you can continuously troubleshoot. But for now, here's how it's exported out. Let's take a look at being able to ingest some of this information using something like C#. All right, what you're seeing here is a console application that I've built to go extract data from one appinsights, put it in another. This one, what it'll do is it'll connect to Azure Storage using a storage key. So you'll connect and you can do that. I believe, yeah, I'm using some application insights, so because I'm pushing to another one, and there's that. Let's see. So first we are reading from blob storage. Let's take a look at this. All right, so going in here in the constructor, we're passing in all the dependencies we need. So our storage account, our key, and our container. So this is our account. We'll create the SAS credential. So this will be sort of a just-in-time credential. We'll confirm that the container we're passing in does actually exist. If not, we'll push it back out. Here's the sort of the meat of it. We're deserializing extracted insights. So we have that here. All right, so in this case, deserializing extracted insights. So I have sort of a generic method here. I'll pass in whatever type I want. In this case, exception, container, blob, prefix. We will get our container client, get the blobs, loop through them, and then actually type them out here. In this case, this says page view, but really it's a type T. You see here, we'll add it, we'll return it back as a list of type T, whatever we're passing in. So how this was called was through this extract records. So really what I'm getting at is that you first connect, you extract your records, and then and whatever you want at this point. So for me, I'm extracting records as this exception DTO object, and that maps to what we showed earlier, where I have my my class that has my exceptions of array and my internals and context. And you can see internal and context will be their own specific kind of objects. So they have a data point within, which has ID, data, version, event time, context, information about device, user, session, operation, so forth here. So all of this is available online in the application insights information online on the docs website. So here's different information for request and so forth. So I'll have all this pushed out to my repo. If anyone is interested, just let me know and I can easily get that out to you. But here's all the different contracts. So this is a way of showing how to connect. So you'll connect to your blob storage, and then you can extract just the JSON itself and put it out. In our case, we're getting the blobs, but we're typing it to a type so that we can kind of transform it, do what we want, maybe filter it some more. Like once we have it in this list, then we can run like a link query or something, right? So I should be able to do. It probably works if you put it after you declare, right? Whoops. Let's put this underneath here. It's not playing. All right, let's try this one more time. So here's all your stuff you can do, like you can do a where clause and choose whatever. If I want to choose maybe a particular type, exception or internal, whatever it may be, right? So you start filtering out, doing select on that. Like if I want to do, say I did my where, select, and then do your select on how you want to do it. So then you can kind of work with the data, make it a little more something you want to do. So that covers that demo. Thank you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this session. You can find my contact information there on the bottom right. There's my email address as well as my LinkedIn. If you did enjoy the session, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel for additional videos coming in the future. Thanks.